This week on the Baseline Podcast, Josh and I break down the chaos that happened this past Sunday when the College Football Playoff Committee left out Florida State. What does this mean for Florida State? What does this mean for the future of the College Football Playoff? And did they get it right? We answer all those questions and many more. Plus, we talk about the transfer portal and what does this mean for the future of college football? All that and so much more coming up on the Baseline Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Baseline Podcast. I'm Ben. That's Josh, and we are back. I'm less sad than I was last week, Josh. I'm in a little bit better of a state of mind. How's your state of mind? It's probably a lot better than mine is right now. I don't know.
Us Gators fans were sitting watching the playoff committee make their decision, waiting to see where our seed was, and then we got screwed, dude. Nowhere to be seen, even in the top 25. Nuts.
You know what I've learned about this committee? I feel like they've just, it's like what I think it was Mike Greenberg said on his show on ESPN. Why don't I just get a whole bunch of my friends together and then just say, screw the records and let's just pick our top 25 and then just go for it. That's pretty much what it is.
That's what this is, man. Like the way that we're going with the 12 team next year, they already voted as if this was a 12 team. I feel
yeah, for sure.
It's invitational style. It's not about what you did in the regular season, who deserves to be there. They've been in this position before. Like 2015, Ohio State was a team that was capable of beating anybody, and they kept them out. Bama last year with the 2 losses, they were kept out, even though they would be favored over some of those teams, and they correctly put TCU in, who nobody thought belonged, and they go and win a game against Michigan. And we run into a situation this year where this was, I'm not going to lie, this was the hardest, I think, decision the committee has had to make. We haven't had this many undefeated and one-loss conference champions coming into the end of a season like this. So it was just a matter of, okay, are they going to do the right thing? Yeah. And they inevitably did the wrong thing.
And, it reminds me a lot of, I feel like, this whole conference thing is weird, or this playoff thing is weird for me, because it's like, I understand why like people like Mike Greenberg are like upset, because and the thing is too is I saw this post today. Someone put a clip of Kurt Herbstreit before the rankings came out, and if you look behind him, you had the 4 teams that are currently 1 through 4 were 1 through 4 on behind him on his little shelves or whatever, and then the next 2 was Florida State, and it was would have been Georgia, right? So to me, it goes, if these are supposed to be surprises, like they were the first year, or at least we were told, right, where Ohio State shocked the world and jumped in there above TCU. Now it just doesn't seem that way. Now it seems like we need the SEC team in there. If we don't have the SEC team, well, no one's going to watch, which I disagree with. I think a lot of people would enjoy watching a playoff when there's no SEC teams. And I'll get into the Michigan thing, because now all of a sudden it seems like we forgot about the Michigan cheated its way to the top, and they're now no one talks about what they did, and that's a whole nother story for another day. But no, I agree with you, and I know people are like, well, Ben, why are we still talking about college football? Look, this is huge for college football, for the future of college football. And so today's episode, we're really going to focus on college football playoff, the New Year's Six Bowls. We'll go over some transfers, things like that. But I think both Josh and I were, I think a lot of people, maybe not just Josh and I, were very shocked with the way the committee went. Because to me, what this says is that it does not matter who you play. It does not matter if you win all your games by 5 points or by 50. What matters is that we want that. This is really what comes down. We want teams that will bring fans. We want teams that will make it in their mind, a competitive game, which I don't know what that means anymore in their mind. I don't know what that means. And then 3, it's a team that, well, there was also an excuse to use, right? Like, well, they don't have your starting quarterback. Hello, Ohio State won with their 3rd string quarterback back in 2014.
Correct.
So if we're going on this logic of there's this rule inside of the selection committee, like I'm tired of hearing that. Like, Florida State did not lose. They did not lose. They should have been in. Now, I get it, and Joel Klatt said this. He said as soon as Texas went in, he knew that Alabama was going in because Texas beat Alabama, and it's just
that was it's like tight. If you put you got to have Texas ahead of Bama regardless
Yeah.
of how it goes because of that
So
head-to-head.
if, let's say, Florida State was at 3, then you're going, okay, then obviously Texas will be 4. I feel terrible for Florida State. Like, I'm not a Florida State fan. I don't really watch
Me
Florida
neither.
State
I
or
hate
anything.
them.
And like the last time I remember watching was like obviously with Bobby Bowden and things like that. But to me, I feel so bad. If you watch that video, man, that video like hurt my heart. Like, as a football coach right now, and as someone who wants to be there for his players, like, you saw Coach Norvell just he looks so depleted in that video. Like, I've done everything to get this team where we're at, and now I've been ripped that opportunity, which is just, it's demoralizing.
Yeah, like you said, they completely ignored what happened the first 10 weeks, even though a college football regular season is 12 games. They only cared about the last 2 they played, and then not even the conference championship, where the game that Jordan Travis went out at, they were losing by 2 scores in that game, and they came back and won. They go on the road to the Swamp, one of the hardest environments to play in. I don't care what anybody says. They go and win that with their backup quarterback. Then they got to play on a neutral field against a 10-win Louisville team,
Very good defense.
and they go and win that game. Like, if we want to talk about Florida State's not as good now that they don't have Jordan Travis, are we going to talk about how Alabama almost lost to Auburn just a couple weeks ago with Jalen Milroe at quarterback? It took a prayer. Are we going to ignore the fact that they only beat a 4-win Arkansas team by 3 points? Are we going to ignore the fact that they beat a 6-win Texas A&M team by 5 or 6 points?
Yeah.
Are we going to ignore the fact that they struggled against South Florida in week 3, actually lost a game to Texas week 2? Like, this is, I mean, we can play this game all day. And then, Ben, people will bring up, well, Liberty went undefeated, so why aren't they in? Show me a single Power 5 win on their schedule. You can't show me one.
Yeah, that's a
they
different
don't have
conversation.
A Power 5 win. And then Cincinnati did get in a few years ago, which I thought they should, but crazy different circumstances there. They have Power 5 wins over Indiana, and then they beat Notre Dame. And that season, Cincinnati comes in as the 4th seed. The only other teams that were even in the mix were that Notre Dame team, whose only loss was to Cincinnati. So they got the head-to-head there. And then Ohio State with 2 losses. And I think most people would have favored Ohio State over Cincinnati. And they might have even favored Notre Dame, the books, over Cincinnati.
They were undefeated.
But they were undefeated, and they did the right thing and put them in because they had the resume. And granted, this year was much different circumstances. We had so many more, like I said, undefeated and 1-loss teams. Yeah. But if you win all your games, and you're a Power 5 conference, you have out of conference wins over 2 SEC schools. I don't know what you can do about that. Like, you got to put them in.
Yeah, and I just, to me, it we already were like on shaky ground, Josh. Like, we were on shaky ground with this college football playoff committee. Every year, we've always been on shaky ground. Like, are they going to get it right? This might have been the last straw for people. Like, 12-team playoff, like, now, are they even going to get that right? Right? Like, that should be easier to get right.
I think the way that they're going is the top 4 seeds are going to be the highest rated Power 5 conference champions. Yeah. We'll see if it ends up being only a Power 4. But if we're going by like last year, Kansas State and Utah are getting 2 of those top 4 seeds.
Yeah.
Do we think they're 2 of the best 4?
No, and it's like, if you, let's just say the Big Ten, right? Let's say maybe Ohio State beats Michigan next year, but they're both ranked in the top 5. You're going to tell me that Michigan doesn't deserve a top 4 seed, right? Or whatever. Look, all I'll say is this year is when it should have started. If you put a 12-team playoff, we don't have this issue, right? Ohio State gets in, Georgia gets in, Florida State gets in, Liberty gets in, right? Like, all these teams are getting in, and there's no argument, there's no discussion, right? To me, it bothers me because, like, I know I brought up the Michigan thing, but it does bother me, right? Because now all the controversy is about this, and then we're forgetting the fact that we put the number 1 team, the team that might actually win it all. If you look at, I mean, really, honestly, they have a good shot, is a team that cheated, right? So this whole football season, Josh, has been one of the wildest. This is like a Wild West now, man. Transfers just can leave like middle of the. I mean, really, this is between now and even the playoff or the bowl game. It's just chaos, right? You have recruiting's also happening in the middle of this transfer season, and then you have prep for bowl games, and then dude, it used to be like fun to watch bowl games. Now I bet as a coach, it's so stressful. Like, you want to play in a bowl game, but it's just like, I can't deal with this. Like, so to me, it's just,
yeah.
It's
and
just
we'll talk we'll talk about later that Ohio State Missouri matchup and how maybe uneventful it could be to watch that now, or eventful if you're a Buckeye fan.
Yeah.
But just a couple more things out of the playoffs, and since you brought up Michigan, that is interesting. I thought that the team that allegedly cheated. There's these allegations out there, and it looks like it's going to be proven that Michigan was using illegal sign stealing methods, and the committee completely ignores that. Doesn't negate anything from the first 8 or 9 wins that they had this year, and goes ahead and puts them as the number 1 seed. But a couple other new things that happened. If Alabama would have been left out, that would have been the first time that an SEC team
They
did
would
not
never
get
do that.
in.
They would never
But
do that.
they would never, ever, ever do
Never.
that. But things that they did do for the first time were take 2 teams that were outside the top 6 and jump them into the top 4.
Yeah.
That had never been done before. The number 1 team dropped out of the top 4 completely over conference championship week. That had never happened before. And then Florida State, which we've already beat that dead horse, I feel like. First undefeated Power 5 conference champion to be left out. Yeah. And now let's make the case for like the teams that got left out. So Georgia, you come into conference championship week with 29 straight wins. You've won the last 2 national championships. You're coming in with big wins over Ole Miss. You've beaten Mizzou. You've beaten Tennessee. And then you come in here and lose to Alabama on a kind of controversial call near the end. And you only lose to them by 3 on a neutral field. And you fall from 1 to number 6, which let me talk about that real quick, because Florida State only dropped to 5. And the committee is telling you that without Jordan Travis, there's no way that they can go and win a playoff game. But they're definitely better than Georgia.
It's
so we're gonna be like, see, look what we did right here. We put you at 5. We think you're better than Georgia, and give them like, no. If they can beat Georgia, they could probably beat Alabama. You're saying?
I'm saying I could say this right now with confidence that if you the Florida State team that finished the year, Georgia beats them, Ohio State beats them. I would even go out and say that maybe even Missouri has a good shot of beating.
Could do it, yeah. Like, this whole argument isn't to say that Florida State's one of the best sports teams in the country. It's that all these regular season games mean something. The whole season's supposed to mean something.
Yeah.
And you're deciding that it's all about ratings and odds and favorability and populist stuff. Like, people that don't care about college football, you're trying to appease them.
No, and like it's gotten away from like, I want to see the 2 best teams in the country, no matter how many losses they have, play for the national title. That's what, in a way, that's what I loved about the BCS. As much as everyone hated it, it was almost always the 2 best teams in the country, whether that was 2 SEC teams, whether that was Pac-12 and a Big Ten team.
If Michigan and Washington are a national championship, I don't think anybody's complaining.
No, and that's the thing. Like, but let's say it ends up being like Texas versus Alabama, then I'm like, well, what about Georgia should have got a shot? Because I think they could beat Texas. I think Georgia beats Texas at 90% of that. I think if Alabama and Georgia played again, Georgia beats them again, right? Like, there's so many scenarios that we could play. And again, I'm not here to play scenarios. But what I am trying to say is that it is really frustrating, because the justification that they gave for Florida State being out, then what are you going to say about Alabama? I mean, Georgia. And then what are you going to say about Ohio State? And what are you going to say about these other teams? Like, you have to be consistent across the board. And I feel like there's so much inconsistency. Like, I remember
they care about different things.
What was it? Like the I think it was the week before conference championship week. They're like, well, Bo Nix has a high completion percentage. That's why they're there. And it's like this doesn't make sense. This is just chaos.
If we want to sit here and talk about who would be favored, like we said, Alabama would have been favored over TCU last year, and Michigan actually was favored and lost. Oregon favored against Washington over conference championship weekend, lost. Alabama favored over Texas week 2 and lost. Like, who cares if you're favored? We decide these things on the field for a reason. If we want to go by, if that's our criteria, just give Michigan the title now, because they got the highest odds to win it all right now. So why even play the games?
Yeah.
One other thing about this, Ben. So we got Alabama snuck in here to the top 4 right here. Moving on to the 12-team playoff, everybody thinks that this is going to create more parity. It's going to open up teams like Ole Miss or Liberty or Tulane or what have you to get into the 12. And all it's going to do is let teams like Ohio State that are missing the top 4, Alabama that should have missed the top 4, Georgia that missed the top 4, get another shot to win it all. Yeah. And the same teams are always going to be winning it. As they've increased the playoff from 2 to 4 teams, we've gotten less parity, and it's only going to decrease in parity.
And I've said this,
letting these teams come in.
I've said this. Josh, we talk about the March Madness, right? And they've always expanded March Madness. Tell me right now How many teams have, by the Final Four comes around, we're like, oh, that's a surprise? Almost never. Like, there's occasional team every so often, George Mason, a couple of these teams that, hey, they shock the world, right? They come out of here.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'm even thinking more specifically, like when you think about football, right? Is what teams in college football, Josh, are always the ones that are going to be on top? They have to have what? The speed, the strength, the numbers, the talent, the money,
blue chip
right?
ratio.
All of these things. Look, no offense to Liberty, no offense to Tulane. No, I'm not trying to, say that you're not a good football team. What I'm saying is, though, is that if I put Liberty on the field against Ohio State or against Georgia, I'm sorry, Ohio State's winning by 30 and Georgia's winning by 40. Right? Like, this is, it's a reality that at the end of the day, the next 10, 5 years of this playoff, it's going to be probably an SEC school, then a ACC school, then maybe a Big Ten school wins it all. Like, until there is true parity, you're not going to see a team from like the Mountain West going out and win a national title like sometimes you see in basketball or sometimes you see in baseball, right? It's just football is built differently. You have to have that blue chip quality, and it's just there's not many teams, and that's what's going to happen every single year.
I'm just also been sitting here like, imagine if the Miami Dolphins last year, since Tua got hurt, the NFL was like, you can't get in the playoffs.
Oh, I know.
Now, Skylar Thompson's your quarterback. Not happening.
No, and that's what Mike Greenberg said. He said, why don't I get all these former coaches from the NFL? We finish the season out. We look at all the records of the teams, and we're like, well, we're not going to put the Browns in. We're not going to put let's say the Steelers in, or the Jaguars in, because they have quarterback injuries. So now we're not going to put them in the playoff. We'll put a team that's 5-11 because they look like they have more upside, right? Like, to me, it's mind blowing that this is the way we view the rankings. And I think it's bad for the sport. I think, to be honest, Josh, I think you're going to push away more true college football fans than you are bringing new ones in.
Or even like the Minnesota Vikings last year, one of the fakest 13-win teams out there.
For sure.
If we just acknowledge that, we're like, yeah, they're not that good, we're going to put someone else in that's 9-8 that we think is better. Be crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Results on the field got to matter.
Yes, for sure.
And speaking of results on the field, let's talk about maybe some of the results on the field of these New Year's Six games, Ben. We'll start with Ohio State, because I think the transfer portal count is up to 12 now on that team.
12, yes.
And it's 12. A decent amount of guys that either were starters this year or would have been starters next year, which is, I think, the other surprising thing right here. But nevertheless, I'm assuming that Ohio State's going to treat this game as a tryout, just as I guess they did a few years ago with the Utah situation in the Rose Bowl, getting new young receivers in here. We'll probably get to see Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis as a starting combo there. We'll get to see I don't know who would be at tight end, Joe Royer, or maybe G. Scott.
Oh, Thurman. You have Jelani Thurman too.
Jelani Thurman too, yeah. And we'll get to see Devin Brown, Lincoln Kine-Holtz, maybe go a first half, second half. I don't know. But I'm assuming that's the approach that Ohio State's going to take. Missouri, on the other hand, I'm not sure. This is kind of new for them. They usually aren't playing in New Year's Six games, and I don't know how many guys they've had enter the portal or declare for the draft just yet. But what's the mindset of Ohio State, you think, going into a game like this?
It's interesting because, I've had, and I know we'll talk about the transfer portal later on the show. It was a little shocking. It was a little, jerking for us Ohio State fans. But to be honest, I look at the guys that left. You look at obviously McCord, but then Fleming. That's a kind of a big, not really a shock. Like I thought maybe he would maybe go pro or try to go pro just because he's been so banged up. But I think honestly, he just wants to be able to be the number one. I think he saw the writing on the wall when you have Brennan Ennis, you have Smith coming in as a true freshman next year. I think he just kind of realized like, hey, I'm not going to get the targets, right? And then you have these other guys, and we'll talk about that later in the show. I won't focus on that. I'll focus on this game. So, this game, I think it's going to be interesting. I think you're going to see a lot of Devin Brown. To be honest, I think Ryan Day's always loved Devin Brown. I think he's always had this kind of soft spot for Devin Brown. My gut feeling is they're going to let it play out through bowl practice. So probably up until like Christmas time, maybe a little bit before that. And then I think he'll make a decision for a starter for most of the game. So my thought is it's probably going to be Devin Brown for maybe the first 2-3 quarters, maybe depending on how the game goes, maybe some packages for Kine-Holtz here and there. But I do think Devin Brown, because he's just had a little bit more time in the system, He showed some flashes this year. You put him in there. And again, I want to make it very clear that none of the Ohio State players that are NFL ready outside of Eichenberg, who accepted a Senior Bowl bid, so he's now not going to come back for his extra year. No one else is declared. So I like to tell Buckeye fans, like, let's just, again, we expect obviously Harrison to declare. If he does not declare, then I will have a heart attack probably and be like, what? Abuka is one of those that I think could play in this bowl game. I wouldn't
Very
put it past,
borderline with
well,
Igbuka. I could see him coming back like
well,
Chris
honestly,
Olave did.
well, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if you see Harrison play in the game. I don't think he's going to come back, but I wouldn't be shocked if you see him play just kind of as like that final hurrah for Harrison. I've heard a lot of rumblings that Henderson wants to come back. This is like not just me, but there's a lot of other like guys that are inside the Woody Hayes all the time. They're saying he's really thinking about coming back. I mean, this kind of makes sense because you saw Pryor go in the portal, which wouldn't make sense if Henderson was leaving. It wouldn't make sense because that meant they're with Mayan leaving and Henderson leaving and Trainum leaving. That leaves you two backs pretty much. So that's why I'm kind of wondering if either Trainum's coming back or if Henderson's decided to come back, which would make it interesting. Obviously, you look at tight end. Does Stover play in this game? Probably not, which means you're probably going to see. I'm going to say G. Scott is probably, this is like his shot. Like this is like, here, G. Scott, be the guy. Defensive wise, like I've always thought that Jack Sawyer would be the more likely to come back and play in this Cotton Bowl. I think JTT's gone. I think Burke's gone. So again, there's so many unknowns going into this game. And so I guess my thought, and I guess to kind of answer your question, I think Ohio State fans themselves are very nervous because we do not want another last year where we lose 2 straight and then we're going to the offseason. But I also don't think Ryan Day is just going to fold. I think a lot of national media think he's just going to kind of fold. I mean, even the odds right now are saying that Missouri is going to win, which, dude, if Ohio State puts their best foot forward and their best team out there, I don't think Missouri wins, and I don't think it's going to be a close game if Ohio State could play up to par, especially defensively. So yeah, I guess that's the mindset, is just, hey, let's see what we got for next year. They're going to be very young next year. So why not, give these guys an opportunity? I think wide receiver wise, if some of those receivers don't play, I would not be shocked you see Ennis and Tate early on. And I think even a couple other guys probably get sprinkled in there as well. So that's kind of the thought process. Josh, you can give us your thought process and then we'll predict the game.
Yeah. I think since most of those guys are on the offense that have declared so far, and since defense was the strength of this team, I think it's all going to come down to how many guys on that defense are coming back. Because if it's almost all the defensive starters, I feel really good that Ohio State can win this game. But I also think a team like Missouri, like I said, they usually aren't playing in bowl games like this. They like to run the football. They got a solid quarterback. I think they're a little more motivated in this game to come out and win, whereas Ohio State is kind of more in let's try some guys out, maybe a little bit of discouragement, but also just using it as kind of like a scrimmage almost, just to try new guys out. So right now I would lean Missouri winning this game, but it's all going to come down to, I think, how many guys on Ohio State's defense are returning.
Yeah. I'm going to do, I think we can predict as we get closer. I'm going to give
we'll do
I'm
more of a,
I'm going to give
a
an
locked
early
in prediction later, but
I'm going to give an early prediction. I think Ohio State squeaks it out. I think it's going to be close either way. I think it's going to be close. But I do want to say, a lot of people I've heard said that, like, Ryan Day pushed Kyle McCord out. I don't know if you heard the story, but
I've heard the story about his dad.
Dad like went into, like, dude, what is this, 5th grade? Like, dude,
it's very crazy. And I think that was even the rumor that it's the whole reason McCord started this year to begin with, was similarly.
Yeah, and it's
his dad.
It's just
having
weird
some kind of sway like that. Yeah,
it's just weird because it's like, maybe that's why Ryan Day was so angry at him all the time. Like, if you look on the sidelines, he just looked always mad at Kyle McCord. And I don't know if it's like, dude, I told your dad you're going to play, and now you're playing, not the greatest, right? So I know we'll talk about that later, but I just thought that was very interesting that, like, people are like, oh, Ryan Day's like, he's losing control of I've heard this story, like, he's losing control of Ohio State. I'm like, no, he's not. It's 12 dudes. Look around the country. Most teams are losing like 8 to 10 dudes normally every year. Ohio State only lost 6 last year or 7 last year, right? So to me, it's just like the Kyle McCord thing. I just think, like, dude, he didn't have the it factor. I know that Zach Smith and Chris talked about it, but like he doesn't have the it factor, and it was very obvious. And this just proves it because I think Ryan Day even, I guess, supposedly told him, "Hey, I want you to stay. I want you to fight for this battle. I'm just not going to give it to you." And when and that to me goes, doesn't have the it. He doesn't want to fight.
Doesn't have it. He doesn't have the dog. He doesn't love Ohio State. It's all the things, right?
Yeah, it's just it's.
And on the flip side, it's also kind of crazy that a quarterback on a Power 5 team that won 11 games and has the team ranked in the top 10 is transferring out. And the fan base is excited.
Yeah. I mean, even Dylan Gabriel is kind of a shocker one. Like and we'll talk about that a little later on. But anyways, we'll talk about the transfers later on. Let's move on to the next game.
Maybe the most fun non-playoff matchup to me is going to be Georgia versus Florida State.
There's a lot of angriness.
Yes, a lot of anger in this game. I think a lot of I got screwed mentality in this. I already described why both teams are going to feel screwed. And traditionally, Georgia's one of those teams that has a lot of players sit out, doesn't really care if they lose. It's because
they've only had a few opt out,
meaningless game.
They've only had a few. They've only had
I don't know, but out. I mean, I don't know who's all transferred out yet, but I mean, you got to think Carson Beck's going to be playing this game.
Yeah.
For one. And I think that makes all the difference.
Well, I know Florida State.
They got some young guys on the defense that are going to be playing.
Florida State, not Verse, but the other guy has transferred out. So their other top defensive end for Florida State is transferred out.
And I know Johnny Wilson declared for the draft. I don't know if he's going to play in this game yet, if that means that he's sitting out or staying. And I'm assuming the same is going to be the case with Keon Coleman, too.
I just wouldn't want to face this Georgia team mad. I'm just saying. I would not want to face
both teams are, I think, going to be mad, and I think Georgia's going to take this game a little more seriously than what they traditionally would, playing in non-playoff bowl games. But, I mean, those are some of my general thoughts on there. And like we said already, Florida State being in the playoff wasn't because I thought they were one of the top 4 teams in the country.
Had the wins.
But I really think that, especially since Carson Beck's playing, I'm going to give Georgia an edge right now, preliminary, until I find out who's all actually playing in this game.
Yeah, same. I think Georgia's got my preliminary kind of vote for that. I love the story of Florida State, but you can only go so far. Like Ohio. Also, let's just point out because people keep pointing out, well, Ohio State won the national. I'm like, Cardale Jones is a different quarterback than Florida State's third string. All right, he was 6'5" and like 250 and had a cannon of an arm, and also they had freak dudes around him, Zeke Elliott and all these guys. So I just want people to stop trying to say that they're the same type of team.
That takes me to Liberty, Oregon.
Oh, yes. Dude,
what a matchup that is.
This game is going to be so much fun, mainly because I love Liberty. Like, it's kind of cool to see a Christian school, but also like a team that obviously, we've known, because going to Cedarville, we met a lot of people that either went to Liberty or from Cedarville went to Liberty. I had friends that went to Liberty, some really close childhood friends. So it's kind of cool to see Liberty in this moment, but it's not going to be close. I'm just going to say that now.
Especially if Bo Nix ends up playing this game, which I could definitely see him finishing out his career on the field. Yeah,
if he plays, this could be this could be one of those games where it's like 56 to like 10. Like, honestly. Yeah. Because Liberty's defense is not that good.
Yeah, and like we mentioned earlier, they haven't played any Power 5 teams, so they really haven't been tested. But you know that they're going to give it everything they got in this game.
Yeah. There's going to be some trickery in this game. I wouldn't be shocked if you see Liberty to pull like a double reverse or a double reverse pass, like just doing something out of the wazoo, man. You got to.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And the other non-playoff matchup, I'm trying to remember it.
I believe it's isn't it Penn State?
Is it Penn State
New Year's Six Bowl? It is.
Is it Penn State?
Trying to look actually. All right, I love how nothing I've researched just popped up. Great, thank you. All right, here we go. New Year's Six, we got Wolverines. No, we don't. Okay, I don't care. Just give me the. Oh, here we go. So we have New York Six. We have Oregon, Liberty, Georgia, Florida State, Ole Miss, Penn State. Yep.
There we go. That's gonna be.
I see. I was right. That one's gonna be fun. I think that one's gonna be the closest.
I think that
might be the closest one.
I think that might be the closest one of having players on both sides care.
Yeah,
and play in the
because
game.
Penn State's trying to prove something because they haven't been able to beat a big team really at all, to be
Right.
honest.
Yeah. Get into a game like this, and you're going to have Drew Aller playing, and I believe Ole Miss is
Also,
going to have Jackson
Ole
Dart
Miss
playing.
and Missouri in the New Year Six is just
Yeah.
weird.
We were
Just
we were
weird.
mentioning during our rivalry week preview that Ole Miss has something to play for with a 10 win season on the line, and this is only I think the second time that they've ever done that. So they're in a
Yeah.
spot that they're usually not in, and we already mentioned Missouri's not either.
It's almost like though it's like it feels like this year you have like 7 teams that are like really good, right? Like really strong teams, and then you just say you really could put like the 14th team at 9, or like what I'm saying. Like I feel like you could swap out some of these teams and it'd be kind of similar in a style, like Oklahoma maybe up there. Some other teams that maybe you could throw in there that might make it
And
entertaining.
the SEC is licking its chops too, because Missouri, Ole Miss, Texas next year, Georgia,
Oklahoma,
Alabama, Oklahoma will all be or would all
that's
be
gonna
playoff
be
teams
that's
in the
gonna be
12 team, I believe.
that's gonna be a crazy league. That's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
that actually might be the new Pac-12 where they all knock each other off and then screw each other. That's pretty much the way it
Well,
works.
I don't know, Ben,
I don't know.
because
It's true.
SEC won, so they can't be left out of the playoff.
Oh yeah, I
Much
forgot.
harder
Yeah, I
schedule,
forgot. Yeah, yeah.
much harder schedule than the rest of the country. So
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
yes,
We just play the Citadel once a year. You know.
right.
Of course.
Anyway, yeah. Then you got your playoff matchups. So you got Michigan and Bama, and that one's very close. I think Michigan's either only a 1 or 2 point favorite right now, so
Yeah.
they think this is going to be very close. Preliminary thoughts: Michigan obviously loves to run the football,
Yes, they do.
and they got to have a lead in this one early to be able to
Yes.
do that. To be able to kill 7 minutes
Let's.
on a drive like they did against Ohio
Yeah.
State, to be able to have 0 pass attempts in the second
Yeah.
half like they did against Penn State, they got to get a lead early here. And I think if they do, they can hold it. But Jalen Milroe's also been freaky lately, and I want to say that they haven't. I'm not even good. No, they've definitely not faced a quarterback like Jalen Milroe this season. That's a fact.
But I will say this. I think we both can agree, Josh, that if Ohio State get to lead early in that game, like a touchdown lead, if it wasn't Michigan, it was Ohio State, then that's a different game, I think, against the Michigan. I think it is. I just think overall the whole game then changes because then Michigan's having to do something that they're not liking to
Michigan's
do.
have to do something they do not like.
So for me, I think when we saw Michigan struggle against TCU last year, right? When we saw them struggle, what happened? TCU got ahead, and then they started throwing the ball, right? We saw with Ohio State near the end of that game, Michigan's defense is not great against the pass. They have one good corner, and then the rest you can find seams, you can find little areas where you can pick a pocket. And look, it's Alabama, and dude, as much as I don't think Alabama should have made the playoff, dude, I've never wanted a team from the SEC to win a game more. And bias is coming on this because this is where I come at it is like, first off, I love the meme that I saw that said when it like popped up that Alabama was making it and not Florida State, like, dang it, I had Florida State plays memorized. No, to be honest with you, I'll be honest, preliminary wise, Josh, I've been thinking about this. This would not be surprised if Alabama wins by like 3 scores. Like to me, Michigan, they're such a really, I'm not saying one dimensional because I know Michigan fans are going to like bash me, but they're very, if they can't run the ball, then they're really struggle to, even in that Iowa game, it was the ugliest offense from Michigan I've seen. Like it just, if you're against a good or quality defense, Michigan just struggles. Like even against Ohio State, you take away that last drive of 7 minutes, they didn't run the ball tremendous against Ohio State. They didn't throw the ball tremendously against Ohio State. So until I think Michigan shows that, I just, man, right now, preliminarily, I'm thinking Alabama probably can squeak away with this. At least that's what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, this is a game that I could see myself flip-flopping multiple times because on one side of the coin, Jim Harbaugh sucks in playoff and bowl games in general.
So bad.
But I feel like this year's Michigan team is just, I mean, the culture's been incredible. They've been winning games without him, with assistant coaches. They just seem like they're on a mission and all in this together. But will this finally be the year? And then you mentioned last year with the struggling in the pass game,
shouldn't
and
have lost to TCU.
They always seem to deter away from what goes well, because the whole reason they were down to begin with is because JJ McCarthy threw 2 pick sixes. Yeah. They just totally changed the way that they played football all year. What was working, they were going to dominate the line of scrimmage against little TCU, right? And then they decided to throw the ball instead. So it's just, is Jim Harbaugh actually going to be able to prepare for a bowl game? And Nick Saban, it's really hard to bet against him. in situations like this too.
And we both counted out. We both said don't count out Alabama back when they lost to Texas, and here they are.
For sure. And even before the season when I picked them to win 9 games, but we'll forget about that. Secondary wise, I think Will Johnson's good enough to lock up any receiver on Alabama's roster. And it's going to come down to Mike Sanderson, Rod Moore. They're going to go ahead and be able to take care of business all around the other side. And then the Michigan linebackers are going to have their hands full just with the threat that Milroe has on his feet, man.
Yeah, and again, I don't know.
It's a matchup. Like I said, I'm probably going to go back and forth on it for a while and not even feel good really about the prediction I come up with.
If it's the Milroe from the last 3 or 4 weeks, then Alabama wins this game. If it's Milroe from the first couple weeks, it could go towards Michigan.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And then another matchup we got Washington and Texas, and I think this one's fun too.
It's gonna be fun.
Very exciting. Washington has played so many close games, and I expect this one to be no different. Weird, so close with Oregon several times, close with Oregon State. I mean, like we've been saying, they're winning games, just not by double digits.
But Texas, Josh, I thought if you go undefeated and you win games, even if it's close, I thought you still make the playoff, right? Like that's the way it should be, correct?
It's the way it should be, but you got to remember Michael Penix did not get injured in any of those games.
Oh, right, because a quarterback injury obviously represents the whole team.
That was represents the whole team factor,
got it.
And why they were able to hold on to the 2 seed in the final rankings.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's interesting. Very fascinating
for sure. But speaking of quarterbacks, Michael Penix versus Quinn Ewers.
What Texas Quinn Ewers are we getting? What Quinn Ewers are we getting?
Right, I think that's what it's going to come down to because Texas, after the Alabama game, was shaky at times. And then they were without Quinn entirely, and they had some close calls, but they dominated conference championship week against Oklahoma State. They dominated the regular season finale against Texas Tech, and Quinn's really seemed to hit his stride. And they haven't
developed at Ohio State.
Yeah, developed at Ohio State. But to finish my thought, they don't really seem to be missing Jonathan Brooks either. I think Blue, their other running back, has really been stepping up, and C.J. Baxter also really solid. Freshman in there. So yeah, this is going to be a fun one. And like I said, I think it's going to be, just because it's the way that both teams have kind of played most of the season, very, very close. And it's probably going to be one that I will also be flip-flopping on. But right now, just because of Michael Penix and Heisman Trophy and just the amount of solid wins that they've had over ranked teams, I'm leaning Washington right now. I think their defense in this one is could be the deciding factor.
2 years ago, I never would have thought to say that Texas would be in the playoff or Washington. It's just weird. It's also be weird if it was Michigan versus Washington, like a W and an M, just like logo. It's just weird. And the fact that Washington is joining the Big Ten next year, kind of odd. But no, dude, Texas and as an Ohio State fan, like with McCord transferring, man, it's just like, what if, right? Like what if Quinn Ewers stayed, right? No, in general, man, I think this game's gonna be great. Again, I've counted out Washington so many times at this point. I'm just kind of like, I should stop, because every time I do this with every team, it never goes well. So right now I'm leaning Washington, but again, Texas has surprised a lot of teams. They beat Alabama, so I mean, they can do what they can. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's where I'm leaning at this moment.
Since I had to bring up that we were wrong about Alabama, I want to correctly brought up that I was correctly high on Texas preseason.
You were. Here they are. You were. Yes, you were. Josh has to get
I think you were there with me to win the Big 12.
I was. Yeah, I did say they were going to win the Big 12 because I just didn't think any other team was good. It's part of the reason too, which is true. True.
Well, that wraps up New Year's 6 games. We can talk about some of these transfer portal people that are going to be maybe impacting some of these games, or maybe impacting some new teams next year. And
I want to get your thoughts before we jump into, like, we can kind of go through a list, because I think quarterback is the big one that
quarterback's always the big one. That's the one that everyone wants to talk about. That's usually all the big names.
I do want to get your thoughts on the Ohio State kind of exodus. It's not really exodus, because to be honest, 6 of the 12 dudes barely played this year. They played like 12 snaps combined. Like, they didn't really play. What is your thought on, I know you mentioned it earlier with Kyle McCord. Now, I think both of us can agree Julian Fleming only has 1 year of eligibility. That one kind of makes more sense. It's a grad transfer.
I thought Julian Fleming should have and would have transferred last year.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that we miss him as a blocker, and also the biggest thing is if you lose him, Harrison, and Ibuka, that's your 3 dudes are gone, and you have to replenish that, which might help them landing Jeremiah Smith and him not flipping to Miami. So that's like the hope is maybe, hey, everyone leave so that we can give him the starting job next year.
Get the young guys playing time immediately.
But what is your thoughts on the McCord thing? Because to me, I was really disheartened because I thought, for the most part, we've never had an Ohio State quarterback where I felt like they weren't competitive. And after that Michigan game, it really showed me how he just kind of was there for the ride. That's to me what is shocking to me. What's your thought?
Yeah, I mean, you can go down the list. Braxton Miller, baller. JT Barrett, say what you want about him, but baller. Justin Fields, baller. Dwayne Haskins for his one season, baller. CJ Stroud is really the only one that we had thoughts on if he really is in this thing. And we finally saw against Georgia and what could have been. And we're seeing him ball out in the NFL now and even getting some fights, getting a little chippy with some NFL linebackers and stuff like that, which is like,
brave man.
Ohio State CJ would have never done that. But even more so, yeah, Kyle McCord. I mean, at the end of the Michigan game, we talked about it, just calling it a game, not really being a Buckeye, and like you said, not even being competitive and wanting to come back and maintain that job and play at one of the greatest football programs in the country. It's just like, okay, well, if you just want to chill and go and play at a team like Nebraska, because I know that's the team that he's got meetings with, or play where his dad played, I think Rutgers. And it's like, if that's where your competitive nature's at, it's like, yeah, I want to have the job and I don't even want anyone to have a threat of taking it from me. It's like, okay, whatever. I mean, not everybody's built to be able to play at Ohio State.
No, and it's not, and it's a high pressure position. And CJ
Stroud
said that.
So it's like
JT Barrett said that.
Nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it's like it is what it is.
Well,
those are true.
It is funny. Truth. Brown posted on Twitter or something like that. I don't know. I saw an article, and the article said that like Brown posted a picture of burning ships and basically like bring it on, like right, like I'm staying here. I'm like I don't care. And it is interesting because obviously Ohio State has Aaron Noland coming in, which is just a great name, by the way. One of the best names ever. Aaron Noland, lefty, freaking awesome. We'll talk about what we think is the what you think Ohio State will do here. But I want to talk about McCord. Where do you think he ends up ending up? I think he leaves the Big Ten. I don't know if he stays in the Big Ten. Pitt sounds like a very good spot for him, like Pittsburgh University, or maybe. Like if he does stay in the Big Ten, I'm thinking Rutgers because of dad, or Nebraska. Like those are the three places that I'm like, that makes the most sense, I think.
Yeah, that one of the things they mentioned about Nebraska in that meeting is that Nebraska plays at Ohio State next year, and I don't know if he wants to be in an environment like that.
Does he want to walk into the horseshoe and just hear, dude, the things that they would say? Like again, I don't condone any of this. But I'm just saying he better make sure he has security around that whole team, because there will be some fans drunk that are just like, I'm going to let him have it. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm leaning more towards he goes somewhere outside the Big Ten so he doesn't have to deal with the questions.
I'm leaning like a Big 12 or an ACC school.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If it goes to SEC, it's the same thing where it's like there's going to be that level of competition and an expectation of high performance that I don't know if he's cut for that.
I've heard one thing that someone said was Kansas State. I think that's genius. Go to Kansas State. Kind of just go be that.
Will Howard is transferring out. Avery Johnson is the competition over there, so it's not a slam dunk. He'd start there, but
or Liberty. Just go to Liberty. Just have a peaceful time at Liberty.
Yeah,
peaceful time. But yeah, so interesting there. Obviously Julian Fleming leaving. Where do you think Ohio State should do? I'm going to get your thoughts. I'll give you my thoughts. What do you think Ohio State should do? Should they get a young quarterback in the transfer portal? Should they get a veteran for maybe a year, or do they just lean on Keenholz, Brown, and say, "Hey, go win the job"?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to go and get a guy in the transfer portal just to create somewhat of competition. We saw Ole Miss do that, going and get Spencer Sanders, and turns out that Jackson Dart's keeping the job anyways. It's weird that they went out and he decided to go over there. But I think if you're Ohio State, you got to go and get somebody so that Devin Brown is forced to compete.
Yeah.
Aaron Noland being a freshman, I don't care if he's the first or second quarterback in his class. It's really hard to start as a true freshman at Ohio State. And I don't think Ryan Day wants to do that either. No. So you got to go out and get somebody that's going to compete with Devin Brown. I don't even really know if Lincoln Keinholz is cut out for this either. I think it's just a cool story being from North Dakota and being like the Mr. Whatever sport
it's South Dakota. It's South Dakota.
South Dakota. Okay. Yeah, I think Lincoln Keinholz is just more of a cool story. We'll see if Devin Brown ends up
So
developing
who
into
do you
this
think?
guy that,
Who's on your list is like the guy that should go, that makes the most sense for Ohio
well,
State?
I've heard people talk about Riley Leonard and Will Howard actually, and to me, I'm just like, ew.
Yeah,
Honestly,
it's kind
like
of
as cool
gross.
as Riley Leonard is as a quarterback, he's kind of like Kyle McCord level to me
Just
too.
more
Like good, not
athletic.
great. Yeah. And Will Howard, I'm like, you mean the guy that just lost his starting job at Kansas State and he's going to be your guy at Ohio State? That doesn't make any
I've
sense either.
I've heard Ward from Washington State, but I don't want
Cam
him.
Ward is the big
He
one,
is
and
he is too mistake prone. I can't I can't deal with more of that. I just can't.
Cam Ward is fun and who I would put my money on at least right now. I know some people have talked about Arch Manning too,
Please
leaving
no, no.
Texas,
That's
but
too. He's too young. It's the same thing with Dante Moore. People are like Dante Moore. I'm like, he's a freshman. So what does that mean? That means your Aaron Nolan will probably want
that's
to
the other
decommit.
thing is like I think the threat of Aaron Nolan is going to keep any of the this year's freshmen away. Arch
Yeah,
Manning, I think, is going to decide after Quinn Ewers makes his decision, but I think it'd be weird if he left anyway, just because this was like definitely a possibility when they picked Texas, and I think they
yeah,
knew that. And then yeah, you mentioned Dante Moore. So like Dante Moore's talking to like Michigan State and Oregon and some of these other schools that recruited him, and I don't think Ohio
yeah.
State's
The
even on his
the
radar. But the same thing right there is like Aaron Nolan's here, and I think that's a threat.
Yeah, and also you don't want to lose Tavian St. Clair, who's now a 4-star in the next class, right? You don't want to
Right.
lose these guys by putting young guys. Some of the names that I thought of, DJU, he might be like more of an underdog sleeper, but I don't. I mean, I wouldn't. Again, if it's for a year, maybe you get some more out of him that they couldn't get out of anyone else. The only other guy that's piqued my interest would be like Dylan Gabriel. Like that would be kind of fun. 1 year with
That'd be
Dylan
another cool
Gabriel.
one. Yep.
Like you have two lefties playing quarterback at Ohio State. When was that? When did that ever happen?
I don't think you'd ever have to question Dylan Gabriel's
No,
competitiveness
exactly.
either.
So I think if you brought Dylan Gabriel in again, it's maybe not the kind of quarterback that maybe Ryan Day wants, but hey, it's for a year. You go get that win, right? Get that Michigan win, and then hey, I can reset this button, get a quarterback in here for the next couple of years to then really train. I think it'd be great. I think you wouldn't lose Brown over that. I think because he would see like, oh, it's 1 year. And then maybe you lose Keen Holtz, but outside of that, I think you keep the other quarterbacks in line. So that's where I would go with that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's
Um,
talk about some of these other guys.
yeah. So we pretty much already covered a lot of the quarterbacks, but another one that I was surprised was DJ Uiagalelei.
I wasn't. Coach left. I
Well,
wasn't.
coach left, but I figured he would just declare for the draft,
I
which
don't. I
I know
don't think
that's
he's
still
ready
a
yet.
possibility, but
I don't think he's ready.
I
I think
also
he's going to
forgot that
Oregon.
maybe Oregon because his brother's there
Yeah.
and they won't have Bo Nix. But I guess I forgot that he had another year of eligibility too,
Yeah.
that he can actually do this. So that's another
Michigan
reason I was
State would
like,
make
oh,
sense. I think Michigan State or
Michigan State's
another
gonna
big
get somebody.
or Nebraska. I could see him going to Nebraska. That's one I could see him doing.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe Nebraska. I'm after now that the season's all said and done, we really thought, and it's looked like DJU was going to redeem himself, but he actually completed a higher percent of his passes last year and had more
Yep.
touchdowns in less games.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well,
And I also
maybe it wasn't just the coaching at Clemson that did it to him.
that's true. Breaking news, by the way, Josh, as we're recording this. Rutgers lands point guard Dylan Harper, number 2 recruit in class of 2024, gives Scarlet Knights 2 of the top 3 recruits in the nation. Who would have ever thought that Rutgers basketball is getting the top two of the top 3 players in basketball?
Hmm.
Side note, just sorry, because we talked about Rutgers earlier and I just saw that on my phone.
Basketball school.
Basketball school all the way. Shout out Tim. But no, yeah. So that was interesting. Again, some of these Dylan Gabriel was also kind of interesting. I was like, you kind of have it going good at Oklahoma. Why don't you stay for one more year?
That's the other thing is like, why is he even leaving? Like he's
Yeah.
in good standing there. He's done great. 2 seasons there now.
He didn't have daddy come in and complain for him, right?
Right.
Like McCord
But
did.
and I don't know if this is a threat, but Jackson Arnold, I believe it is another very highly ranked quarterback recruit that they had last year. And I don't know if there's any threat of him overtaking the job, but
That is
even
just weird.
still,
Yeah.
yeah.
Weird. But yeah, so those are the quarterbacks. Again, there hasn't been really any other big names out there. I mean, a couple guys from Georgia have transfer portal. I know the backup quarterback. He just committed to Kentucky, I believe.
Brock
He,
Vandegrift.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, he just committed to Kentucky. There's a
Kentucky continues with the
defensive end
transfer quarterback
from
U.
Florida State. Defensive end for Florida State. Obviously, we talked about Ohio State's transfer portal. Georgia's
Oregon lost a linebacker too, I
yeah,
think, a starting
Oregon as well.
linebacker.
Again, if you follow us on our Instagram at baseline.podcast, you can actually see. I usually try to share all of the big, announcements. But again, I think for Josh and I, we'll probably see more next week. I think we're going to see a lot more at the end of this week as we're recording this. We'll see a lot of those. I think we'll see a lot more declaring after like the Heisman ceremony and those kind of things. I think you'll see more declares, I guess, for that. I guess we can kind of talk about that. I guess here, Josh, is there any like buddy that hasn't declared yet that you're kind of like, do you think that still might be on the fence that might be thinking about coming back that hasn't come out and stated they're going to leave?
People are talking about Marvin Harrison and Caleb Williams, and I'm like, stop it.
Yeah, no, Caleb.
I don't know. I don't
Caleb
really
has
know
said
what
he's sitting out. Like he's sitting out, so that means he's obviously leaving. I don't know about Marv. I mean, look, my inner Ohio State Buckeye fan is like, yes, please come back. We will serve you on a silver platter. But let's be honest, dude, the dude's gonna be a top pick in the draft. Take your
Chris
money, man.
Olave and Garrett Wilson, I think, loved Ohio State more than he did, and they sat out too.
Yeah.
And I think Marv's a good dude, but I mean, he's gonna do what's best for him.
And I think
out of this
it might have been a site of this might have been the last straw too, is that his buddy McCord is no longer there. So
right.
that also
So what
might
good
be
is
like,
it going to do for him? What's it going to do for his NFL stock to go out there and play with Lincoln Kienholz and Devin Brown, right?
And that's why I'm more on the sense of Emeka Ibuka comes back because he had like a low year. That one
he
makes
did
more
not
sense.
Explode like you would have thought. Like
that one makes more sense.
We came into the season thinking that him and Marv could be 2 top 5 receivers in the country, and instead, guys like Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, list goes on, outplayed him.
Yeah.
So if Ibuka wanted to be like a first round wide receiver, I think he comes back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that too. I think, Travion, obviously we're waiting on that one. Ollie Gordon, I don't know. I think he's a sophomore, so I think he's coming back for the.
He might have to come back, yeah. Donovan Edwards is another one that I would say keep an eye on.
And
quarterback, he didn't have as great of a season as he probably should have.
There's some quarterbacks out there, like even Cam Ward from Washington State. Like he doesn't have to transfer. Like he could just declare but I don't think he's got the talent quite there yet.
Right.
There's a lot of different guys. Obviously, we'll keep you informed as it gets closer. Obviously, Josh and I will do more draft stuff, and we'll kind of get you ready.
And we'll find out like some of these Texas guys too, like Ewers and some of those Michigan guys. Like I'm kind of thinking JJ McCarthy could come back too. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I think that's in Ohio State. I think the same thing. I think JTT. I think we both agree he's probably gone. But I think we both have.
I'm not sold on JTT going either.
But I am sold on Jack Sawyer coming back. I do believe Jack Sawyer is going to come back for one more year.
Probably. Just not the explosion.
People keep saying Steel Chambers is leaving. I'm like, no, he's not. Like, he's not ready for the NFL.
If he has a year of eligibility, I think he'll probably be back.
I would love to see Denzel Burke back, but let's be honest, that's not happening. Again, so we've had All-Americans announced. We won't really go through those. You can go check those out. But one thing I do want to talk about is the awards, Josh. Not all of them, because there's a lot of them. But we talked about the Heisman. And Josh and I got it right. Let's just be honest, people. Josh and I are geniuses. And we told you there'd be a token guy, and that'd be Marvin Harrison, and then the other 3. See, we just know what we're talking about.
We do. But I also don't think it was that hot of a take to include Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, and Michael Penix. I think everybody was talking about them. And Marv was being talked about as like another one, but there's a couple other people that were in the mix as like non quarterbacks too. And they decided to go with Marv, even with I know he didn't boom in every single game, but the talent and the ability is definitely there. You can see it on tape.
Yeah. So who do you think wins this? Let's just give our prediction for the Heisman.
Well, I already know Marv's not going to win it.
Yes, I know that.
I'm pretty sure Bo Nix isn't going to win it because Michael Penix has now beaten him twice.
Yeah.
So now it comes down to how much they love the undefeated Power 5 conference champion season that Michael Penix led his team to, all the big games, all the close wins. But then you got Jaden Daniels on the other side that outplayed him week by week, had more total yards, more touchdowns, but had the 3 losses. But none of those losses were really his fault.
Yeah.
So that's what it's going to come down to, is how much they it's kind of like with the Alabama Florida State thing. Are they going to do the right thing, give it to the guy that played the best season, or are they going to give it to the guy that was on one of the best teams in the playoffs?
Yeah.
You know,
I
and then not that, and I'm not even gonna like. I don't want to diss Michael Penix like that and say that he doesn't deserve it because he has had a Heisman worthy
two
season.
good years.
But yeah, but I mean, Jaden Daniels, come on, man.
No, Jaden Daniels deserves it, but it would not shock me if Michael Penix wins that on Saturday. I think it's the Saturday or next Saturday. So, yeah, again, I think Bo Nix finishes third. Obviously, Marv finishes fourth. But let's be honest, Ohio State, by the way, fun fact, they've had 6 finalists in the last, I think, 6 years. Well, 5 finalists in the last 6 years. Obviously, C.J. Stroud had 2 years in a row.
And yet Florida has as many Heisman trophies in that stint as Ohio State does. So what are we talking about?
Oh, I'm just stating a fact, Josh.
I'm stating a fact. The last 6 years, Ohio State has 0 Heisman winners, and so does Florida.
How many finalists does Florida have?
Doesn't matter. What's the point of going if you're not going to win it?
You know, that well, winning's not hasn't been something Florida's said in a very long time. That is
By the way, Trevor Etienne, our running back in the portal too.
I mean, am I shocked? Am I shocked that people are leaving Florida?
Burris actually did not leave.
He probably should have to give you guys a room for getting a better quarterback, but
we got a good freshman coming in, so he's got like one legit shot starting though. And then the year after that would be like, yeah, you gotta go.
Hey, see you, buddy. Hey, your scholarship, I'm ripping that up. No, yeah. So that's what I think. Blitnikoff, I think we both agree. Maybe we don't. I think Harrison's going to win it because I don't think you put him at the finalists as a Heisman and he doesn't win the Blitnikoff. I think that's just stupid.
It'd be pretty dumb, but that Blitnikoff tends to be a numbers game, and that's why guys like Jordan Addison have won it.
But it's so funny though, if you look at the 3 guys, is they all lead something different. So like Marv leads in touchdowns, I think Neighbors leads in receptions, and then Duzier or Neighbors leads in yards, Duzier leads in receptions. It's just really weird. Like they all 3 lead in something else, like separate. So again, those are the crazy. Obviously, we'll see what happens in these, and we'll go over the awards when they happen, as Josh and I usually do. We'll go over the All Americans. We'll go over all those things as they come out. But Josh, any thoughts on the Browns before we finish up the show? Specifically, the fact that Joe Flacco, out of all those years we've hated the man, is now the guy. It's just weird. It's just weird. That's all I can say. Yeah. This whole season's been weird for the Browns, and yet they're still in the playoff hunt. I don't know how. Don't ask me how. I don't know. Even Myles Garrett has just fell off from his pedestal wherever he was. He's definitely not the same as he was early in the year.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Flacco, I figure he'd probably be the guy just because of the lack of competition on that team right now. But we play the Jags this week, and are we sure that Trevor Lawrence is playing in that game?
He's out.
He will be out. Yes. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. This is going to be a game that the defense is definitely going to
need to win this game. They cannot.
They need to win it.
Straight.
Yeah,
they cannot.
Yeah, you can't. If you want to be in the playoffs at the end of the season, right now we're at a 3-point home favorite right now,
and the defense has to show up. And obviously, you get Ward back and Garrett he's healthy.
This is a game that the defense is going to have to win, and that we can't make mistakes in. It's a winnable game, though.
Yeah, and I mean, Flacco showed that he still has arm strength. He's got a cannon still at 38 years old.
Finishing out the season from here, we host the Bears the week after that. That's got to be a win.
Yeah, should be a win. So that means if you win those 2 games, that means you're 9-5. If you win those 2 games, you're 9-5.
Correct.
Then I believe you face the Texans. I believe is after
Texans, the Jets, and the Bengals.
So I think Texans is a tough one, but I think the Jets and Bengals are winnable. So you could finish the year easily 11-6.
If you finish 11-6, the rest of the season, it sounds like.
If you can finish 11-6, that is a beautiful way to finish the year.
It is, but for a team, go out and get the ones that you got.
Exactly, for sure. I think we both agree on a Browns win this week. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Baseline Podcast. It's been fun. It's starting to snow. It's like raining and snowing here in Hungary, but hey, winter is here. Christmas, by the way, also, Josh, happy December. We are in December, and Christmas will be coming, so we'll have I think like a 1 or 2 more episodes before Christmas, and then we'll celebrate Christmas and have fun with our families. But anyways, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you love this episode on YouTube, go ahead and click that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, add a comment of who is the most jolly of them all on the podcast. Is it me or is it Josh? Josh is always smiling. He's always ready for anything coming his way. And if you've loved it if you like listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you share it with your friends and family. That would be much appreciated. And as always, until next time, we'll see ya.